Hi folks, welcome back to 3 Minute Tales. This is the Shebeen and I'm your storyteller Shanna Key. Now, war and conflict has probably affected most countries on earth at this stage, and Ireland is no exception. Just after the 1916 Rising, Ireland had her own civil war that raged for a number of years. It not only tore communities apart, but families apart. And this story tells one such tale. It really is a very, very sad and tragic story, but it has to be told. So please sit back and enjoy. If you like the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And please, if you'd like to comment, you can do so down below. And as I keep saying, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please hit the little subscribe button and the little notification bell beside it. It doesn't cost a penny, but it just means that if they are clicked, each time we upload, you're notified. So until the next time, thanks so much for your time. I'm Shanna Key. Early in the month of September 1921, 11 men would sign their signatures to a political document that would change my life forever. Up until then, myself and my brother Owen had never exchanged a cross word between us. We had grown up in a small cottage on the outskirts of Ballyporeen in the county of Tipperary. Our father, Kevin Walsh, was the local school teacher, and our mother Sheila proudly took care of our little home. My father, myself and my three brothers, Sean, Francis and Owen, were the apples of her eye. My father and his father before him had a keen interest in Irish history and politics. His strong political views rubbed off on both myself and my eldest brother, and our home was known locally as somewhat of a political household. The twins, Sean and Francis, were 2 years younger than me and 5 years younger than my oldest brother Owen. They both expressed an interest in drawing and painting, much to the delight of our dear mother. Owen and myself, however, were far more interested in righting the wrongs of injustice and fighting for our country. I was just 17 years old when the 1916 Easter Rising had occurred. Since then, both my brother Owen and I had dedicated our lives to strive for an independent democratic republic and hoped that Ireland as a nation could be freed from tyranny once and for all. On the 5th of October 1917, I enlisted as a member of the 3rd Tipperary Brigade of the Irish Volunteers, joining Owen, who was already rising quickly through its ranks. Our aim was to overturn the British ruling of our nation by whatever means it took to achieve our goal. I was assigned the position of Junior Intelligence Officer, gathering information on the movement of the British Army and the Royal Irish Constabulary in the local countryside, while my brother was now quartermaster of the battalion. Due to my quick temper and impulsive nature, my brother Owen had recommended that I should not be issued with a firearm until my disciplinary trial of 6 months be completed and assessed. I had pleaded with him that I be allowed to participate in more serious issues other than just reconnaissance, but he stood firm and told me to be patient. So I was patient to the point that for once I listened to and digested everything that I was taught by my superiors. By the summer of 1918, I was fully trained in both armed and hand-to-hand combat. I was more determined than ever to put my life on the line for our cause and to ensure that we reached our goal sooner rather than later. Owen's approach to our goal was far more pragmatic than mine. He claimed that if we could be enough of a pain in the arse for the British, they would be forced into negotiations with us and perhaps we could achieve our goal without too much bloodshed. The British were only beginning to recover from their war with Germany, and this gave us great leverage to apply further pressure on Westminster to grant us our independence. But while the British troops were on our soil, we had an obligation not only to our fellow volunteers, but to the public of this great nation, and to continue to drive them off our land. Our battalion was instrumental in a number of attacks on the RIC, the British Army and later on the Black and Tans. During these skirmishes, I followed orders from my commander and meticulously carried out the work that I'd signed up to do. I took no pleasure in taking the life of another man, but this was war. I was a soldier, and it was my duty to put any misgivings I had aside and to carry out any assignment that I was expected to fulfill. Eventually, after years of turmoil, ambushes and countless lives lost on both sides, preliminary negotiations with the British government regarding Irish independence was put into place. In October 1921, a delegation of Irish Republican patriots, mostly made up of elected TDs and other civil servants, met with the British establishment in London to thrash out an agreement that might be palatable for both sides. After weeks of toing and froing, the final proposal by the British government was a withdrawal of British troops from most of the country, leaving the 6 counties of Ulster under the governance of the British. The Irish Republic would become a self-governing free state, but remain a dominion of the British Empire, and all members of the Free State would have to swear allegiance to the King of England. To some of the volunteers, these proposals were acceptable. My brother, just like General Michael Collins, believed that this left the door open for further negotiations, and given time, we would eventually achieve our goal of a 32-county Ireland, free from any British influence. I, on the other hand, believed that these set of proposals were an insult to the Irish people. Under no circumstances could I accept or endorse this treaty. We'd fought far too long and hard to accept such a diluted set of proposals. In early 1922, Michael Collins persuaded the sitting Dáil under his chairmanship to ratify the treaty. This decision ultimately sparked the start of the Irish Civil War. My brother and I began to argue incessantly over our difference of opinion. I felt like that he'd not only betrayed myself, but the people of Ireland by bowing down to the British. So our battalion was now split into 2. Some were in favour of the treaty, others like me were totally against it. It got to a point where my brother and I couldn't even look at each other, and talk of some volunteers informing on each other to the other side was rife. When a group of us heard that 2 or 3 of our own men had been leaking information to pro-treaty activists in Dublin, a plan was put into place to put a stop to it. Myself and another 3 loyal patriots planned an ambush on a small contingent of our own volunteers who were apparently meeting with a group of civil servants in a farmhouse on the outskirts of Thurles. On the afternoon of the 5th of July 1922, as my 3 comrades set up a makeshift roadblock, I sat crouched on a hillside 200 yards away with my Hotchkiss machine gun perched on its small 2-legged stand. Armed with a 38 caliber revolver, one of my comrades hid behind the roadblock waiting for our targets to arrive. At 3:20 in the afternoon, a small grey open-backed truck containing 7 pro-treaty volunteers came into view. As they approached the roadblock, they obviously became aware that something was awry. They immediately stopped the truck, alighted the vehicle and opened fire on my comrade, killing him instantly. I was too far away to identify any of them, but I never hesitated. Over the next few seconds I let fly with a burst of machine gun fire, and the 4 that I did manage to hit were dead before they hit the floor. The 3 surviving targets made a hasty escape in their truck, as myself and my 2 surviving comrades fled the scene over the hills on foot. With rock-solid alibis, we were fairly sure that we were in the clear. I went home and was fed a bowl full of hearty stew by my mother and made small talk until a loud knock sounded at the door. I stayed put at the kitchen table as my mother went to open the solid heavy wooden door to our cottage. Within seconds, the peaceful silence was broken by the bone-chilling wailing of my mother. At the door, the local priest, Father Sean Cleary, informed my distraught mother that her beloved son Owen had been shot dead in a suspected Republican ambush. Immediately I felt sick. I ran to the sink and regurgitated my dinner. Without hesitation, I knew that it was I who was responsible for my own brother's death. I hadn't known that he was in the group who we had ambushed, but immediately I realised the consequences of my actions, and I knew that this was the start of the end for me. Now I sit by my brother's grave. I know I can never reveal to my heartbroken parents that their beloved son was cold-bloodedly killed by his brother. The guilt and the shame I feel in my heart can never be extinguished, and now as I sit here a broken man, I realise the futility of conflict. On the 16th of September 1922, 23-year-old Martin Walsh put the muzzle of the gun that he had used to kill his own brother into his mouth, pulled the trigger and took his own life.